you don't really know yet.
I'm going to make it different than this one.
Yeah.
I'm going to make the beginning like it.
Asa Verrett does not look disabled, but he is profoundly different. He writes stories, and that is all he wants to do. This 7-year-old does not watch TV or care about food or toys. He expresses no emotion, no enthusiasm, unless it is connected to his stories.
I'm going to add as much as words as I add to the pictures.
Asa will often stay up late into the night writing. He writes 1 book a day. It's an exhausting schedule.
What's that? What's going on?
That one in the spring.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish that in the spring.
Yeah.
I already did some of it.
Asa is not alone in his fixation.
You want your extrements on?
This boy's only focus is appliances. He knows everything about them. For this one, it's trains, 24 hours a day. For this boy, it's game shows. What they all have in common is Asperger's syndrome, a brain disorder that processes only abstract objects, not people or emotions. He is now completely consumed by making his stories into animated movies.
Is that what you want to do with your movies?
Yeah, I want to do it today.
Today? Well, we can't do it today, but...
As an infant, Asa seemed truly gifted intellectually. He could recognize letters of the alphabet at 8 months and was highly focused. Father Phil Snyder remembers that at age 1, Asa was unusually interested in street signs.
He would stop, and I would have to stand there sometimes for 20 minutes while he pointed to each letter and, named each letter.
We thought he was just really bright until the playground started, when you first bring your child and they're old enough to start interacting, and they just don't.
Dr. Fred Volkmar, a child psychiatrist and head of the Yale University Child Study Center, has been instrumental in putting Asperger's syndrome on the psychiatric map.
I know this is unfair, but I'm going to ask you to try to define Asperger's in just one sentence.
Children with amazingly good verbal skills who socially are essentially totally clueless. And every time you try to have a conversation with them, the topic inevitably will come back to their area of special interest.
Asa was energetic and seemed social as long as we talked about his characters.
I'm going to have a string to make his mouth move.
A string for his mouth?
Yeah, but I want him to be as tall as me in the movie.
But watch what happens when I try to talk about anything else.
Can you tell me something about the school you go to?
Therapists are groping for ways to help Asperger's kids. Asa has attended a program run by the New York League for Early Learning for the past 2 years. Academics are no problem, but these boys struggle to learn the basic social rules of life, how to look at people's faces, how to listen when they talk. And even with constant support, Asa has problems in group activities. He seems completely alone in this crowd of dancing kids. At Yale, Dr. Volkmar and his team are trying to decode the brains of these children.
When they look at faces, the part of the brain they use to look at faces is the part of the brain that the rest of us use to look at objects.
In the area of the brain used to process faces and emotion, the Asperger's patient's brain shows no activity at all. Compare that to the average person. This is a child with Asperger's looking at an emotional movie scene. His eye movements are tracked by the small camera he's wearing. Notice where his eyes go, almost exclusively to the speaker's mouth. Imagine if this was all you saw. How could you interpret what people were feeling? But this is how these children see the world. As for Asa, 2 years of daily work have made it possible, for the first time, for an ordinary miracle in his life. Asa has a friend.
And Tim is joining us now. There's a million questions that occur. First of all, why boys?
We don't know. It clearly seems to have something to do with genetics, the male pathway. We know it runs in families. Asa's father, Phil, has been diagnosed with Asperger's retroactively. That is, when he looks back on his childhood, it's clear that he had it, just wasn't known and diagnosed at that time. So there's a scramble to figure out the genetics of this and the brain dynamics of this.
Is it something, because since we've only known about it for 5 years, we haven't tracked it with people, but if his dad retroactively can be diagnosed, do people grow out of it or learn to compensate for it so that they can be perfectly normal?
Well, the dad, Phil, had to figure it out on his own, but with somebody like Asa now in a school program like this, getting all kinds of early training in social skills and recognition, we think that these children, many of them, maybe most of them, can turn out to be very functional, especially if they can learn to take their particular talents, their particular focus, and turn it into something that earns them a living.
And why do we think it's related to autism?
Because they have the same kind of emotional flatness that autistic children have. Now, they're very verbal in contrast to true autism, but in many ways they share that world where they look at the world through very flat emotional lenses, and so they're part of that broad family of conditions.
How did we find it? How did we not know about it until 5 years ago?
Well, it was something that we had to find is part of the autistic syndrome, and I think it had to be teased out from that.